Evening. Thank you for joining this remote school committee meeting of April 16th, 2020. Before we get, I'd like to have a roll call. Tom Wise,
Here.
John Parks,
Here.
Carla Nazaro,
Here.
Aaron Gaffin,
Sorry, here.
Sean Brandt,
Here.
John Doherty,
Here.
Chris Kelly,
Here.
Jennifer Stiles,
Here.
Jennifer Allard,
Here.
and Gail Dowd.
Here.
And I'd also like to thank Paul and Andy. I neglected to do that last time for being our IT experts here and helping us run these meetings. Also, Julian Carr, and also point out that we're broadcasting live on RCTV. So similar to last week, we'll open up for public comment so that people can send the email to D as in David, G as in Gary, school committee at reading.k12.ma.us. If you send an email that we will read the public input at the end of the meeting, so there's an opportunity for people to send their emails. If you have an question on a topic that's on the agenda tonight, you can send an email to the same address, and we will answer those questions as well at the end of the meeting. So that's the public comments section. Then we'll have a consent agenda. Then we'll hear some reports. We'll review a revised calendar and then vote on that. We'll have a presentation on the consortium and we'll vote on that. And we'll have a discussion on kindergarten and rise tuitions and vote on that. And also a presentation on the out-of-district tuition and all of our transportation contracts, and we'll have a vote on that. We'll then have the superintendent's evaluation discussion and a vote. And the other item on the agenda, the Student Opportunity Act, we are not going to have a presentation on that tonight. And John, if you just wanted to offer a little color on that real quick.
Sure. In meetings that we had this week at the state level, and in particular with the commissioner, currently the Student Opportunity Act deadline was moved to at least May 15th, perhaps later. And the commissioner made it very clear that this is something right now that should be put on the back burner because of the question of state funding. Not that we received a lot of state funding for the Student Opportunity Act, but a combination of the state funding and that there are other pressing issues going on right now at the state and local level. So although, as you can see, the presentation is done, it's probably at this time better to wait until we have more definitive direction.
And it is quite a lengthy presentation, so if the action on it isn't imminent right now, I felt maybe we could put it on in the next coming weeks where there's a little less on there, so we can spend the good amount of time on it that we'll need. Just in summary on the introduction here. There are, the packet had various emails we received, and we'll adjourn after that, after the evaluation, and the plan right now is to have a meeting on April 23rd, which is a week from tonight. And then any meetings after that we'll discuss in the calendar when we get to that section. So having said that, the consent agenda, don't believe we have anything for that.
That is correct.
So now we'll have reports. We're very happy to have Maura Drummy on the call tonight. So I'll put her right on the spot to see what's going on with her, and if you have a report.
I do. Wait, can everyone hear me?
Yes, you
All
can
right.
turn your. There you go.
All right, awesome. Hi, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. Today, I have a longer report than usual, and I'm going to talk about remote learning, the student perspective, alongside some updates on senior activities. So in terms of remote learning, as you all know, it's begun since April 6th, and we've had required learning pass-fail. And how it's been for me and the rest of my friends, we receive assignments on Monday, and they're due by the Friday of that week. Usually we receive the assignments on Google Classroom, and it's been very easy to navigate Google Classroom. You're able to just turn in the assignment right there, whether that's by adding in a separate document and just clicking submit, or by watching a video. It can actually track how far you've watched the video and whether or not you actually answer questions along the way. So we've had those. Some of the assignments have been reflections, notes, videos, documentaries, articles to read, and overall, it's been very manageable so far. A lot of seniors have commented that it's nice being able to have that time to do it instead of it being day by day, because you're able to do it in sections and spread it out over time, depending on anything else you might be doing. An interesting assignment that's going on right now is the This I Believe. So that's a senior tradition, is that in an essay, seniors talk about their values and beliefs and some sort of personal anecdote that ties that together. And remotely, seniors, one of their assignments is to work on that, and they submit it through Google Classroom. And I think they're hoping on collecting all of these and maybe having audio recordings. So it's nice to know that that senior tradition is being preserved. And so in terms of the other senior activities, Class Office has been working very hard remotely. We've been having Zoom meetings every other week or so to try to make sure these events we can, even though obviously people's health comes first and everything's up in the air right now as to whether or not things are postponed or canceled, but we're trying to kind of restore some spirit virtually. So you might have been seeing as you drive around town, some people have decorated their doors. They have pictures of their senior, different pictures of the activities they might be doing. So that's a way to, spread some senior cheer. Also, one of our big events and big fundraisers was Mr. RMHS. This was an event where seniors would put on some sort of comedy act to compete to see who was the funniest at the school. Unfortunately, that was postponed, but what we've been doing is, since a lot of the contestants did videotape themselves doing their act, we're working hard to have some sort of virtual Mr. RMHS live stream where the people at home can just pull it up on their computer and watch the pre-recorded acts. Last week, we had a Q&A with the contestants, a live stream, and we actually had a couple hundred people watching that from their computers, which is cool. It's just a great way to keep people entertained during quarantine. And even though it's not the same as the regular Mr. RMHS, it's still, we're preserving that tradition. Additionally, we've been working hard on a slideshow. Seniors have been submitting photos of them throughout their time at the Reading Public Schools, and we've been working remotely to create that slideshow. So even if we can't present it to the seniors in person, they can still access it virtually and watch it with their friends and family, or with their family at home. Also, some exciting news on the senior gift. This year, there was a large need for a lot of elementary school teachers told us they wanted some sort of activity where they could have read aloud activities. That's something typically in their school day. So what we did is every student could sign up for a book, some sort of children's book, and they videotaped themselves reading the kids' book. And these videos were all put together in a Google Drive folder, so students from across, teachers from across the district can access them and use these videos as learning tools for their students. So right now, we've got a lot of great feedback from teachers. They said that the elementary schools kids are loving the videos, and it's a great way also just to remember our class because they're the ones having the video, introducing themselves, and talking about their own experience in elementary school. So those are a few things we're doing right now just to keep senior cheer, and everyone's been working hard remotely on that. So that's what I have for you today.
Well, thank you, Maura.
Thank you.
And you know, God bless you and all the seniors. You know, I'm really proud and that you're all making the best of it and with this situation you're in, and just really, you know, really good to hear. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Jen Size, do you have a report?
Yes, I do. And just like you, I'd like to thank Maura. That was so inspiring. And really, it goes to a lot of the connection and connectivity that we are really trying to do with our families. As of this afternoon, the special ed teachers and related service providers have made over 5,000 contacts with families just in the past couple of weeks, providing supports and resources and doing direct instruction. And we're working very collaboratively with our CPAC. We're meeting with them every Friday to talk about what parents may need, what's working, what kind of supports can we provide. And we really appreciate having that opportunity to really work closely and collaboratively with our parents. So from a special ed perspective, we've been working on creating continuation of learning plans. Those are plans that are written for every student who has an IEP. They aren't IEPs and they don't need to be signed off like an IEP, but what they are plans to say how we're really going to focus on the 3 different tiers of support that we're providing to students and families. 1, that connection and connectivity. 2 is the supports and resources. And then the 3rd layer is that direct instruction. So the teachers and related service providers have been doing that direct instruction, but these plans will really help lay it out for families in terms of schedules and supports. Included on those plans, there's something called office hours, and that's a term that the state is using. And we really want to clarify that it's not office hours in traditional office hours where you can just check in if you need to. We're really thinking of them as instructional meeting times. So if parents would really like some clarification on what to practice with their children, or if we need to teach, pre-teach or reteach a concept to students, it could be happening during that time. We're going to be running IEP meetings as much as possible. And the team chairs are working very hard to make sure that they are supportive and as user-friendly as possible. And to that end, we're going to be offering a parent training on what IEPs will look like through using Teams on Wednesday, the 22nd from 1 to 2. We'll just walk through what it looks like, what the questions might be, and how to make sure everybody has access to it. We're really working hard on developing a lot of staff and parent trainings that are going to be upcoming. We'll be sending them out in a newsletter later this week or early next week. And we've also had success. Allison Wright, who is the assistant special ed administrator, who's amazing, and I have been doing parent drop-in sessions. We've had 5 parents join us thus far, and we're finding that it's very helpful. So we're going to continue to do those on a weekly basis. And if we continue to get good feedback from families, we're thinking of continuing that even into when we return to school, so that families can have access to us if they have any questions or concerns. The other thing that's happening, and I'll speak just a little bit to it, is Jen Allard and I have been working with an amazing team of people on a mental health committee, and over the next week or two, we hopefully will be rolling out a website that will have resources for students, families, and staff, and will be everything from what do I do in a crisis to some tips and tricks around how to maybe structure your household during this time. And we're also working on emergency protocols, and that's something as well that we're hoping we have success with continuing this committee that has Lauren Sabella, Julian Sullivan, Mary, our nurse manager, and lots of other people who are jumping in. Some of our school psychologists, Lori Johnson has been amazing, plus the 2 psychologists at the high school. We want to continue this work so we really have a good emergency protocol going forward as well. And I don't know if Jen has anything to add to that. But that's a summary of some of the work we've been doing this week.
Excellent, thank you. Gail Dowd, do you have anything, or I know you're presenting later, but I know
I do have a couple of quick items, and to mirror what you and Jen just said, Maura did an amazing job. I'm glad I didn't have to follow her. I'm glad that was Jen who got to follow her.
Oh, thank you.
If only I could be as poised. So a couple of items I did want to just keep the committee aware of. We continue with our food distribution, and I do have to give another shout out to Danielle Collins, our food services director, who has just been doing an amazing job keeping this program going. We have started to see an increase in the number of students that we are providing meals to, and we do anticipate over the upcoming weeks to get even more needs come our way. I did also want to let the committee know that today we were very fortunate, as part of our command meetings, Paul Jackson, who is the assistant fire chief here, got a call from an individual at Boston Bean Coffee Company, who are headquartered out of Woburn. They are now, like many other companies, closed down for the most part, and they had food that they did not want to have it go bad. So we were very fortunate. They came and did a donation to us today of hummus, yogurt, hard-boiled eggs, mini pretzels. So a lot of items we're not able to easily obtain anymore. So we're excited that in the next round of distribution that we're going to be able to enhance what we're putting in the packages for the families. So it was really nice. We're gonna post some photos later because he did great, and he's going to continue to try to go through their inventory, and to the extent he has extra stuff he can contribute, he's going to try to make weekly donations to us. So I did want to acknowledge that, and I think the families will appreciate that. The other area we're also continuing to make good strides on, as we mentioned last week, as part of the MOA we had with the Reading Teachers Association, we were able to add language such that our nurses are assisting the town. Mary has been phenomenal. She's spending, I want to say, at least 4 hours a day assisting the town. The town health nurse had left about a week ago. Mary has stepped in, assumed 35 open cases to do a lot of the contact tracing that is being done. We also have 2 of our other nurses that are helping out 3 days a week, about 4 hours a day on those days to help us through this period of time. And I know we have heard from the Board of Health as well as the fire chief that they're extremely appreciative of the collaboration we continue to have with them. We're continuing to deploy technology. So basically we touch base with the principals on a daily basis And every time they've come to us with a family that needs technology or our staff members, we're continuing to deploy that. We'll get into some of the financial pieces later, but that's been a very busy area with a lot of information coming between federal, state, local, as well as DESE. And the other area that we will be giving updates at future meetings, but we are spending a good amount of time on, is also monitoring all of our various capital projects. As you can imagine, those are becoming a little bit trickier now with a lot of the restrictions that are going on. So we had a really good meeting this afternoon with John, the town manager, the architects, facilities, to walk through each of our projects and try to figure out the best way to move forward, especially, I want to say, I think it was yesterday, the Board of Health voted new requirements that any projects the contractors will be required to adhere to. So we just got copies of that and we're going through. So we do anticipate in the upcoming weeks to be able to provide updates on all of the various capital projects we have going on. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Chris Kelly?
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Yeah, it's been pretty busy. I'm going to echo everyone else's comments. I'm going to quote Kate Boynton, our high school principal, to say how proud she is of the seniors. And Mara, you did a great job of representing your class, that they've really rallied through this. This is definitely something that we've never seen before, and we continue to be just so proud of the way our seniors are really handling this with grace, and really that community spirit between the door decorating and the remote Mr. RMHS and some other things that they have cooked up that'll be coming in the coming weeks. And I especially, as the person who really pays attention to learning and teaching, I love the idea of the class gift and reading stories aloud. We've already heard great feedback on that. So on behalf of everyone, I just want to thank everyone, the senior class parents and the senior class students, of course. I know we're really hoping to be able to finish off the year and really memorialize a wonderful class and some great successes. So much to be proud of. As far as remote learning, last week's meeting, I really outlined, or I guess it was a week and a half ago, we really outlined what was going to be happening. As Maura did so eloquently, the high school remote learning has been up and running since a week ago Monday, as well as Rise Preschool, followed very closely by the middle school, and the elementary teams definitely got out information later last week. So we're roughly in our first or second week of remote learning, and I think it's going really well. And I just want to just say so much thanks to our Reading staff. The learning and teaching team, Heather and Allison, who work with me, have worked behind the scenes doing a million things to get things up and running. The tech integration people who have been so patient and training people on platforms that they've never used before. The principals who have spearheaded their remote learning plans and really fine-tuned them that would really work well for their teams. The department heads at the high school that I've been lucky enough to be part of that leadership team for the last year and a half have just come together, and I've just seen such amazing leadership strength with that team at the high school. And then obviously our team members, our teachers, our department, our team chairs, our special educators, our service providers, our nurses, all the clinicians, really just a Herculean effort that I've seen. Silver linings in all of this, I have had so much contact with folks in the last few weeks, which has been great. And also, I think Jen Stice, since she came along, she and I have formed an unbelievable partnership of really working as lead educators in the district and not really defining our roles as student services or special ed and general ed or regular ed. And I think this crisis, as I call it, crisis education, has even solidified that. We really look at learning in global language. Obviously, there are nuances to the work that she does, and certainly nuances to the work that I do. But it's been really nice to be able to collaborate and connect many times a day and really work together. One of the other silver linings that as we talk about our remote learning is the increased focus and the continued focus on equity. I think since my days in Reading and even being a member of this community, I know that Reading really cares about its people, and I think that's really been showcased. I'm really, really proud as a school district and as a community that we focused on supporting everyone while we built the infrastructure to really develop a really comprehensive continuity of learning, which is still growing. We're currently in phase 2. As we said, phase 1 was that connectivity and providing resources and building our infrastructure. Phase 2 is where we are now, and if our closings were to continue, we would certainly build upon phase 2. I don't know if we'd quite call it phase 3. And I think that focus on equity and really meeting students where they are. And I think that's been an unbelievable process too. And I know Gail's team with the tech folks who are helping tonight and have helped get computers in kids' hands. We're still giving out computers. So if anyone is watching remotely or knows of anyone, please contact your building principal and let them know that you need a computer. We want to make sure that as we continue with our crisis/remote learning, that kids have computers to work on the work that they need to do. The other thing that I think is very exciting as a curriculum leader is that this whole crisis education really has solidified the curriculum work that we have done and will continue to do. I know in the coming days, we're going to get some guidance from the state on where now. And I talked about this a little bit at the last meeting about compacting the curriculum and how do we teach the third of this year in next year possibly, and then what does next year look like, and possibly the residual effect on the following year. But the state has told us that they're going to give us some guidance on some of those power standards and emphasis that we should make, and it'll certainly impact MCAS testing should it return. As you know, it's been canceled for this year, or you may know we're not having any MCAS testing this year, and we're still waiting on guidance on what the next steps will be. So, you know, overall, I think that we're in a really good place. We are really still focusing on how to use all the technology tools. One of the things that really warmed my heart is when Maura said that the Google Classroom has been a really good resource because you log in and everything's there. We're trying to make things as simple as possible, but we recognize that there's a steep learning curve with this, with students, with families for sure, and definitely with staff. So we're asking for continued patience with all of that. We know that our staff is working really hard, although the learning that we're presenting, and I know John's remote learning plan that he sent out itemized that we're looking at about half a school day and a little less with the elementary teams and obviously preschool. But really, those plans take longer to plan than a traditional school day. So our teachers are still really working very, very hard and putting in a lot of effort. So I continue to be impressed with how people are handling this under an unprecedented and very stressful situation. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Chris. John, I know you're presenting tonight. Do you have anything else that you wanted to report on?
I actually do have a few things. First of all, Maura, well, good to see you. We've missed you. It's been a long time since we've had school committee meetings, so it's great that you were joining us tonight. I love to hear the reports. Last week, an email came in from the CPAC that I failed to see during the meeting, and I know it's in the packet, but I think it's important to read, and I did promise the CPAC that I would read it tonight at the school committee meeting. And this is from the board. The board members of the Reading Special Education Parent Advisory Council, known as CPAC, have seen firsthand that the district administration is working diligently to meet the needs of students during this vulnerable time. The board appreciates that Dr. Stice has encouraged the CPAC to share parent concerns with her. Since schools have closed, Dr. Stice has been in constant communication with the CPAC board via email and during weekly meetings. Thank you. And this was submitted by the CPAC board members Maria Morgan, Laura Noonan, Alyssa Scaparati, and Amy Stewart. So I promised that I would read that tonight, so I wanted to make sure that I captured that. The committee also got an email this afternoon, which I would also like to read since we're kind of in limbo between meetings. And this will be in the next packet, but this is from Kevin Sexton. Kevin is a parent at Rise and Wood End. He is also a member of the Board of Health, and he has seen firsthand the work that's been happening at the town level. Gail mentioned earlier the nurses and the collaboration between the town and the schools. So I believe he's sending this email as a parent's perspective. So it's dear school committee members, first let me say, wow. Our new, while temporary way of life sure happened fast. And as such, you've had to adapt on the fly to a new way of educating our kids. I can only assume you have received mixed reviews from parents, but usually in a crisis, those reviews can mainly be angry ones. So I wanted to reach out to you as a Wood End and Rise parent to give my perspective for what it's worth. My guess is that this type of crisis had no formal step-by-step plan for our kids to be out of school for this period of time. From my perspective, what the staff and teachers have rolled out to my kids has been a good experience, considering, while not perfect, I can appreciate that they did not let great be the enemy of good. In the time of an unprecedented crisis, one in which no one alive has ever experienced, which brought the complete stop to one way of life in an instant and for an uncertain period of time, I appreciate all that has been done for my kids. While some may not have liked the speed at which we got up and running, and again, I can only speak for pre-K to 5, I found it absolutely necessary for us to digest. Let's face it, it's a big learning curve for all of us parents. For my wife and I, we are still working and easing into a new way of doing things with our jobs on top of recently being promoted to teachers. You all rock, by the way, and can absolutely have the job back when this is over. As the weeks went by, more and more information came out from the school department, adding to what the previous week had done. To me, this slow but consistent rollout of where we are today was essential to making it all work under the new norm. As a committee, you have a monumental task before you, and I'm confident that you can work your way through this. Just remember, this was the ultimate of unknowns, and there'll be plenty of time to reflect on the good, the bad, and indifferent later, and just keep pushing through. And that's from Kevin Sexton, 20 Emerson Street. I really think that captures the work that all of our staff have been doing, and I just wanted to relay that to everyone, and I want to thank Mr. Sexton for sending that. I do have a couple of other things. I was on a couple of conference calls at the state level this week, and I just want to update the committee on some of the key points. I believe Mrs. Kelly already brought up one of them. One of the things that the committee is going to have to discuss in the near future, once we get some guidance, and this deals with the school calendar for next year, is September 14th, which now is Marathon Day, the Boston Marathon. I believe the state is going to declare this a state holiday, so we're going to have to take a look at the school calendar to see how that plays out in terms of next year. Governor Baker is scheduled to give us some more information about extending the school closure or not extending the school closure early next week or sooner. We anticipate we'll hear something soon. There's been a lot of discussion that there will be a conglomerate of states that will be working together in the Northeast to do the same thing. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in terms of school closings and moving forward. MIT did a study of all of the remote learning plans in the country, and Massachusetts ranked second in the nation on the quality of their remote learning plans. And the reason why I bring this up is because the remote learning plan that we are using here in Reading, a lot of the qualities of the state learning plan we are using in our remote learning plan, and actually we're extending it even a little bit more. So I just wanted to mention that a study has already been done of all of the remote learning plans, and Massachusetts does rank second in the nation on that. Some other news that we received, which you'll probably hear more and more as we continue along over the next several weeks, because of everything that's going on in the uncertainty now of state revenues. Essentially, the F-21 state budget is essentially going to be starting from scratch. It sounds like because it's already April, that there's going to be one budget instead of a House version, a Senate version, and then the governor signing it. So they're all going to be working together to come up with one unified budget over the next couple of months. This is going to be important information, as obviously we need to move forward on our FY21 budget. Mrs. Dowd and I have already had a few conversations with the town manager, so we're already having these discussions internally on what this could look like. So more to come on that. And as Mrs. Kelly said, the MCAS has been waived in all grades for this year, including the MCAS Alt. And we will be getting more guidance in the future about what that looks like for next year, and also the competency determination for high school graduation for those students that may not, at this point, have passed the MCAS. And a couple of other things. We did send out today to the community the updated version of the frequently asked questions. It's amazing how much has changed in the last month since this crisis started. There's a lot of new information on special education in there. In particular, a lot of the questions that Dr. Stice had sent out last week in a parent letter are in there, as well as updates in some of the other areas. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So now we'll go to committee reports. I watched the remote select board meeting last night, and the one takeaway, other than this, I think they're still talking about their liaison assignments, but anyway, they did vote to change town meeting to June 15th, I believe is the date, and they're, I guess, still trying to figure out how that will be done logistically. But a date has been set, and there was also some discussions about the budget and a 1/12 budget and stuff. I didn't really follow all that because I didn't have the background material that I think they were referring to. So, sorry, did I say a 1/12 budget? So I guess that's just something we'll need to stay in touch with the town manager on to find out if that's happening or what they were talking about on that. But other than that, I think the big takeaway from that meeting was which I'm not surprised, the later date for town meeting. Tom, did you have any reports?
Chuck, you took my one report, select board, so I'm good with that. There was no PVC meeting, so there's nothing to report on that front. And yeah, no finance committee meeting either, so we're good.
Thank you. Aaron, did you want to give a report?
Sure. I participated in the CPAC video phone conference last Friday that they've been doing weekly with the Director of Student Services, Assistant Director of Student Services, Central Office Admin, and then typically it sounds like at least 2 members of the CPAC board are participating. I was really impressed by how much is going on behind the scenes, and I was impressed by the collaboration that I observed that's been happening between our special education department and the CPAC board. And I would say one of the main takeaways for me is that CPAC really wants to serve as a liaison between special education families and our, special education in Reading. So if parents have joys about things that are going well for them or concerns about things that are not going well for them, they should definitely reach out to CPAC, and they'll be happy to try and help. That's it.
Thank you. Carla, did you have a report?
I don't have any reports.
Okay, no problem. John,
Nothing to report.
Sean,
Nothing tonight, thank you.
thank you. Okay, now we go on into the calendar discussion. Dr. Doherty, did you want to make a presentation on that?
Sure, thank you. Although this is a different kind of year, this is usually the time of year that you vote on the last day of school. What makes this a little bit unique this year is because of the remote learning, we are having 2 days during April vacation this year. Tuesday, April 21st and Wednesday, April 22nd, which is next Tuesday and Wednesday. The rationale behind doing that, and in discussions with the RTA, they were in full agreement with this also, is that we're just starting to gain some momentum with remote learning. We didn't want to shut down for the week, so we felt that a hybrid of a couple of days of remote learning and a couple of days for families to just take the time off would be a good mix. So also by doing this, it allows school to end on Friday, June 19th, where before it was ending on the 22nd. So I would recommend that the school committee vote for the calendar change and the last day of school being Friday, June 19th.
Thank you. Can I get a motion?
Sure thing, sir. Motion to approve the continuation of remote learning on Tuesday, April 21st and Wednesday, April 22nd, and to change the last day of school to Friday, June 19th.
For a second?
I'll second that.
Can you just say who?
Oh.
I know.
Erin Gaffin, I'll second that.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Tom Wise,
Aye.
Erin Gaffin,
Aye.
Carla Nazaro,
Aye.
Sean Brandt,
Aye.
John Parks,
Aye.
Chuck Robinson, aye. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the to approve the changes to the NEC consortium agreement. John?
Yes, to give a little bit of background for particularly the new committee members, we belong to two consortiums, special education consortiums, the SEAM Collaborative and the North Shore Education Consortium. Currently, I serve on the board for both. And there, by state legislation and regulation, there are articles agreement that were approved, I believe it was in 2016, 17 timeframe. Anytime there is a change or a proposed change to those articles of agreement, not only does the board of directors have to vote on it, but each of the school committees for the communities that are in that collaborative have to vote as well. And if for it to pass, 2/3 of the school committees have to approve it. The changes I'm bringing forward to you this evening, there are three major ones, and as you can see, they're in their packet. It is the admission of the Pentucket Regional School District as a member. It's amending language to create a superintendent-only board. Right now, the state statute does allow school committee members or superintendents. I believe the SEAM Collaborative is a superintendent-only board. This would amend that as well. And then the language regarding responsibilities of board members, that if board members repeatedly miss meetings, that there are options in what happens, that those communities, that community is not considered a non-voting member after repeated tries of communication. This helps with quorums. At times we have difficulty getting a quorum if there is a committee member that is on a board member that is not there. So those are the three changes. I did include for you the articles of agreement with the red line version so that you could see what the articles look like.
Okay, we'll have a motion and followed by discussion.
Sure, Tom Wise with the motion. Motion to move to approve the proposed changes to the NEC Articles of Agreement.
Is there a second?
second, John Parks.
Thank you. John Doherty. So one of the changes of making it a superintendent-only board, is there any school committee members on that board now?
No.
What's the thought process behind that, making that change?
I think honestly, it was an article that was voted on by the whole board. It's to create consistency among the board members.
Thank you. Tom, did you have a question?
Yeah, somewhat similar to that line of question, Chuck, that you just had. John, if you wouldn't mind, it seems to me like the second and the third change that are being proposed here are somewhat counterbalancing each other or counterintuitive to each other. One where it says only a superintendent can represent a school, and the second where it says if a superintendent isn't able to represent, then the school district becomes non-voting. It almost seems like it's tying our hands, and that we couldn't, in the case of an illness or anything else going on, we couldn't have Reading represented properly unless there was a temporarily appointed superintendent or anything else like that. Can you talk a little bit about the thought process of that and any other experiences other districts have had with interim superintendents, or why the penalty clauses in essence are being put in with the third bullet in this memo?
There's been some districts where the superintendent has not shown up on a consistent basis, which with NEC, because there are currently 20, I believe, communities, creates sometimes a quorum issue. There were a few districts last year where the seat was vacant, and the school committee did not take a vote to have the interim fill in, which would be the school committee would have to do that in order to have representation.
So following up on that, Chuck, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
So then the idea behind the third bullet then is to reduce the quorum number from 22 to 20 to 18 or whatever, so you can still meet quorum and still have conversations. Is that a general understanding?
Yes, because these are public meetings. These are posted public meetings.
Okay. And the idea to make it superintendent only, was there any conversation at the board meeting about the flexibility that removed from a district in the cases I mentioned before? And have we ever had to appoint anybody besides yourself to this committee?
No.
No in both cases? Okay.
No in both. No. Yes on the first case. No on the second question.
Okay, so can you talk through a little of the discussion about what happened to switch and why? The justification, is it really only because we've only had superintendents on that committee? Is that the thought process?
There's only been superintendents on that committee, as has been the SEAM collaborative.
You're all set, Tom?
I'm good for now. Thank you, Chuck.
Sean, did you have a question?
Yeah, I think it's a slightly different question in the same vein as Tom's. So John, is it your understanding that an acting or interim superintendent, so long as appointed to that position by the school committee, would count for the purposes of a district being able to participate as a voting member?
Yes.
Or would that district then go inactive? Okay.
No. Yes. The school committee would have to vote to allow that person to be a voting member. But yes. It can be an interim superintendent, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tom, another follow-up?
All right, I'm playing off of Sean's a little bit further, and I'm thinking back to last summer in our particular case. We had last summer where we did not appoint an interim superintendent. We had 2 months where we would not have had representation. And in the new articles, that would have gone past the 30 days, past the 45 days, and we would have become a non-voting member until we went back in good standing. What are the ramifications of being a non-voting member?
First, there aren't any board meetings during the summer. So that would not have pertained to that situation.
So play that out if it was a school year. If it was June
If you're
through
a
November.
if you're a non-voting member, you just don't get a vote. So you don't get to vote on the budget. You don't get to vote on any of the motions that are made at different board meetings. You don't lose any of the benefits of being a board member, being a school. So you do still get the member discount on tuition, those types of things.
John, just to clarify, say, along those same lines, in that situation, if it was during the school year, does the school committee have the prerogative to, if it's not necessarily an acting superintendent, just appoint somebody to hold the vote until not?
No, it needs to be a superintendent or an acting superintendent or an interim superintendent.
That's what I thought. Tom, did you have something else?
Yeah, I guess, as I think through this, it's not a question anymore. It's more of a statement as we, contemplate and discuss this. Have no problem with the first article of, Pentucket Regional School being added. I have no problem with that. I have no problem with the third of, a non-participating district being moved to non-voting and managing quorum. It seems like the second, limiting it only to superintendent, even if SEAM is also in a very similar fashion, does potentially tie a committee in a district's hands too much and forces something in a worst case scenario. And that's really all this is the worst case scenario, right? In a normal situation, no problem. It's the worst case scenario that you sometimes don't plan for that you then get stuck with. Now, maybe there's no negative ramifications as long as we can still, get the discounts and whatnot, but we would not be a voting member for budgets or anything else along those lines. So I'm a little hesitant about approving across the board. I don't know if we can line item veto. It doesn't seem like we can here.
No, you can.
But I'm hesitant as a result of that one point.
Sean?
Yeah, Tom, I hear what you're saying. I do think, though, that as I read this, the previous version of this also would have required the school committee to meet and appoint a different representative in the instance of an absent superintendent for any reason, right? So, yes, it's a little bit different because you've got to appoint an acting or interim superintendent for the purpose of this, for the purpose of qualifying for this, if you will. But the scenario you played out where if it happened during a period where we didn't have any meetings for some period of time or what have you, that would have been a problem for us, even in the sort of old version of this where we would have had to appoint a different representative.
John, is there any ability to go back to the collaborative or the group and say, we'd like to, we don't in theory disagree with what they're trying to do, but we'd like to give the district some leeway in that, in Tom's term, that worst case scenario where, the school committee has to appoint someone to represent at a meeting or to in a situation where there isn't an acting,
No, the way the process works is the board votes on these first, and then it comes to the school committees. So now you have to vote.
right?
You can vote up or down. If 2/3 vote in the affirmative, then the articles pass.
Okay. Don, did you have something else?
My only counterpoint, as Sean and I go back and forth here, is that the previous version allowed us to at least appoint one of us in the worst case scenario. The current version means we have to first appoint an active or interim superintendent in the worst case scenario, which we may or may not be ready to do. And that I think is a higher hurdle, for lack of a better way to put it. Yes, we would have to have a meeting, but we could theoretically call a meeting just for that purpose, have that one agenda item, appoint ourselves, and adjourn the meeting relatively quickly, versus going through the process of appointing an acting or interim superintendent is a little bit more intensive and extensive than appointing somebody to represent RPS on the collaborative.
John, has there ever been precedent where a district wasn't represented at a meeting for a reason they didn't have a superintendent, or where
Yes.
where the school committee could reach out directly to the collaborative to come in and give a report as to what we didn't vote on, what we couldn't vote on, or
I'm not sure I understand.
just if we don't have a person that's we don't have someone going to the meetings because we don't have a person that we can send, is there any way we can still get feedback as to the substance of the meetings? Can the school committee request that from another member of the committee?
It's a public meeting, so the minutes are posted on the NEC website. It's like our minutes are posted.
Okay,
And because it's a public meeting, you could go and give
right.
input at the beginning. There's always a public comment at the beginning.
So we could go and express concerns about or comments about a budget item or something.
Yep, yes.
Carla, did you have a question?
I think it may be more of a comment. I think they're looking for some continuity of having superintendents on the board. I can see if we, for whatever reason, had an interim and that interim wasn't available to make those meetings, then we would be, so to speak, out of the game for a while, but we still wouldn't lose benefits or anything like that.
No, you would not.
We would have access to the meetings with the information. I don't see it as much of, am I missing something? I don't see it as much as an issue.
No, I don't think you're missing, and I think it's just to use Tom's words, in the worst case
Right.
scenario. Yeah. Yes, Tom.
All right, just to play out the worst case scenario, there's the possibility here that we're not able to appoint somebody to the board, and then there is the possibility in the articles that they can remove us if we don't have representation after a period of time. So I don't think we want to be removed. I don't think we want to be, there's the conditions of membership, there's the active participation, there's if you remain inactive for more than a year, the board may vote to terminate the membership. And we shouldn't be inactive for more than a year. We shouldn't be in a case where we don't have an acting or an interim or even a full-time superintendent for over a year. So it's highly unlikely in the use case, right? But it is a possibility if you were to say, if you really to play this out, that nobody from Reading in that particular case could represent Reading. Hopefully it never happens. I think we all expect it won't ever happen, That said, we all expected we'd never have all of our students out of school for 3 months or 2.5 months or a month and a half or whatever it is, right? What we're going through right now was never expected. So it's part of the contingency planning here in my head is what's the worst that can happen and what would that mean to us? So the worst that can happen is we have no seat for more than a year, and we're kicked off the collaborative. It's highly unlikely, but it's possible.
John, in the instance where a decision is made to boot someone off the collaborative, I think of like town meeting when somebody doesn't come to so many meetings, and then they have a caucus and the person has a hardship or whatever, and you end up keeping them there. Would the board do the same thing? Reach out to Reading or whoever and say, you know, you're going to lose your seat, and we can appeal that?
There would be several communication with the school committee chair before that would happen.
Okay.
In the 11 years I've been on the board, we've never kicked someone off the board.
Sure. Any other comments? Danny? We're ready for the vote. Tom?
Nay.
Carla?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Chuck? Aye. Thank you. Now, we'll have the kindergarten conversation. Just one, before we start this, I just wanted to say is, I know the letter that went out by central office, you know, I just want to comment on it, that the superintendent and central office were, you know, acting as fiduciaries on when they looked at finances and potential future financial situations when that decision was made. So I think that, you know, I understand that, you know, some of the emails, you know, were because people are anxious about a lot of things right now, but that wasn't meant to any you know, get everyone anxious or upset. They were trying to do what they felt for the district. So, having said that, I'd just like to have an update from, I guess, John and or Gail on kind of some of the numbers or what we're thinking.
Yep, I can definitely jump in with that. Thank you for setting the stage on that, Chuck. We do appreciate that. And, you know, obviously these are uncharted territories for a lot of people across the board. We've also been in constant communication with surrounding towns and my counterparts as well. And I know we've all been trying to balance and do the right thing across the board. For full day kindergarten, the recommendation and suggestions that we have would be to forego and forgive the last month payment. So we split the payments over 10 equal payments. So we would recommend to the committee for a vote, if this was the direction that you wanted to go, that we forgive that last payment, and then anyone who has not made a payment, we would forgive that payment, and anyone who has submitted the payments, who have automatic deposits made, we would proceed with issuing them refunds based upon the vote of the committee. So we did look at that, and based upon the number of paying students that we have, the lost revenue would be $113,920. We do feel that this is the right direction to go, especially in light of everything that's going on. We do realize and understand the challenges families are facing and continuing to face as this proceeds even longer. It's difficult to say how far this will go and how long people may be out of work or temporarily laid off. I did want to let the committee know that at an upcoming meeting, we'll be reviewing all of the finances. As you can see, there are several agenda items tonight talking about this. We are keeping a running list of items as they come up because, as you know, we are continuing to pay all of our teachers. And as Chris Kelly and Jen Stiles mentioned, our teachers are doing a phenomenal job reaching out, doing everything they can to connect with students across the board from every grade level. So we do have that commitment. We are including kindergarten, and when we get to RISE, they are incorporated in all of our remote learning platforms and programs. So we are committed to continue that, and we have made the commitment that obviously we are paying the teachers throughout this process as well. So we are balancing a lot of items. I do anticipate that given the revenue decline within the revolving account, that we most likely would be coming back to the committee at a future date, looking to potentially decrease the offsets we were budgeted to take in the current year. And we do plan on going into that in more details. I know that's usually one of the first questions folks ask is, what does this do to the balance? As you know, we were very fortunate that we did have a nice beginning balance. Obviously, with the decline in revenue, it would impact that. I also do know that based on looking at preliminary numbers for next year, our kindergarten numbers are down. In addition, we do know we have several students who are recommended on IEPs who would not be paying, and I do, not that I have any definitive data, but I do anticipate we may also see an uptick in free and reduced applications as well, which will also impact that number. So we have started to look at this as not just a one-year potential issue. I do foresee this as being a multi-year concern for the revenue coming in as well as the budgeted offset. So we do want to be prudent, and I do think that we'll have a much broader discussion about looking at the offsets for this year and not setting ourselves up for next year and the year after, when I do anticipate having lower revenue coming in. But we would like to recommend the 1-month forgiveness of the kindergarten tuition. So hopefully that provided some background and high-level information on the numbers as well.
So we'll have a motion and then followed by discussion.
So this is Sean. I can make this motion.
John, hold
Move
on.
that this. Oh, sorry.
Tom,
You actually have a motion, Tom?
yes,
My bad.
We have
My mistake.
we have pre-written motions.
My mistake.
No problem. Chuck, I just wanted to check with you because the motion does talk to RISE too, and Gail has not yet updated on RISE.
I'm sorry, I can do that. I wasn't sure if you wanted them separate.
I was going to interrupt it, but I think, please, if you
Okay.
could, because the motion pertains to both.
Okay, sorry about that. I didn't know if you wanted to talk
like
about each.
I should
Okay.
have called for the motion here.
Perfect. So for the RISE program, we also, as you heard earlier, we're doing a lot of the remote learning and the videos. The RISE, we've received a lot of really positive feedback, so we definitely are reaching out to all populations within the RISE program. But again, looking at what is currently going on around us, we also feel that the right thing to do would be to forgive 1 month of payments for the RISE program as well. The RISE program works a little bit differently. We have a 3 half-day program, a 4 half-day program, a 3 full-day program, and a 5 full-day program. So the recommendation we would have is whichever one of those programs you're in, we would forgive 1 month of payments for that. And that would be a total of $33,595. And it would be the same approach that we would take is those who have made payments, we would work to reimburse. And those who did not, we would not obviously ask them to submit the payments. And we'll be having similar discussions about this program as well, because this will obviously impact the revenue we had projected compared to the offset that we would be taking. So we would also be coming back to the committee in the not too distant future to talk about where we look for the year and recommendations as to the offsets. Again, trying to make sure for the current year as well as going forward that we are positioned well, but we do feel comfortable being able to do this based on the balances.
Thank you, Gail. Tom, did you want to read the motion?
Sure. Chuck, I'm going to make one minor change to it just because it only talks about refunds, but I want to talk about forgiveness of the last month as well. So I'm going to say move to authorize the refund or forgiveness of 1 month tuition for RISE and full day kindergarten.
So, Linda, did you get that change?
Yes, I did.
Is there a second?
I second.
I'll second.
It's Carla.
Okay. Is for any discussion, question? John Parks?
Yeah, Gail, with the forgiveness for refunds, are we looking at furloughs for any employees for the remainder of the school year?
We currently are not, because all of the teachers are continuing with the remote learning. So we are committed to continuing with what we are doing. And as of this point, obviously we've done it through the May 4th is when the anticipated return date is. We have not had discussions about furloughs or layoffs because again, they are all still working to get these platforms up and running and connecting with all the students and the parents. So that would not be part of ours. We would not be looking to do that to offset the lost revenue.
Thank you.
Aaron, did you have a question? Aaron Gaffney?
I did, thanks. Gail, are you able to say where the revolving accounts stand currently?
So I have run numbers. Again, these are very preliminary, not to be, we're still reconciling because some of the payments are still somewhat in transit. So the numbers may change between now and the end of the year. Right now, we are looking at about 1.6 million in the account. One of the items that we do, just to let folks know, is if you look at the balances may be higher than that. What happens is we get registration payments in the first month of next year's tuition this year that I can't count towards this year's balance because it's for next year, so I have to back that out. Roughly, we've had about $50,000 of payments made for the month of May that we would be, or the month of April that we would be looking to refund. We have a budgeted offset of 1.1 million. So that would leave the ending balance at approximately 505,000. And then if I started to look at preliminary numbers for next year, and if everything somewhat holds, we would be looking that the balance would be coming down closer to about 330 to 340,000. So we would definitely be rapidly going through the balance that's in there.
Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. Aaron?
Aye.
John Parks?
Aye.
Tom Wise?
Aye.
Sean Brandt?
Aye.
Carla Nazaro,
Aye.
Chuck Robinson, aye. Thank you, Gail and John for rolling up your sleeves and digging into this. I appreciate it. I know the community does as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, you're still up, Gail.
Oh, boy.
Okay.
We should have brought 2 glasses of water for this one. All right. So the next one, in keeping in line with, which is why hopefully folks will start to see why coming up with an exact number of how we're doing has been a little bit challenging of late. The next item we wanted to talk about, and I'm going to go through both tuition and transportation. Is that okay? I'm not sure how your motion, Tom's nodding, so I'm going to go through both of them. So what I'm going to walk through the history, the challenges, and where we are, and ultimately to keep in the back of your minds when we're going through this, what we are going to be asking the committee to do is to allow myself and John to negotiate with our transportation and out of district, and Jen Stiles would obviously be involved with the out of district. I don't want to leave her out of this equation. Providers, as we are all trying to work together through everything that is going on. So as everyone is well aware, the schools closed effective March 13th. And as of right now, the latest date that we have of returning is May 4th. We've been monitoring all of our contracts. We have been in touch with all of our vendors. As you can imagine, this was a shock to them as well. What has happened is the conversations that we're having with all of our vendors are really focused around continuity of service. So if we think about how these vendors work, your transportation vendors, we need to make sure that if schools start, whether it's May 4th, May 15th, May 27th, pick a date, we need to make sure that our vendors are here and ready when we're ready to return to school. And that is critical for our transportation vendors as well as our out of district schools that we have our students placed in. Early discussions arose, I will say, probably that first week of March. DESE set up a lot of conference calls with all of the area superintendents, business managers. I know the Commissioner of Education on one of his desktops also came out and said he strongly recommends that districts work with their vendors and come up with an agreement to continue some form of payments. The federal stimulus package that came out also had wording in there that they are encouraging municipalities to continue discussions and negotiations and payments with their vendors. We've had many discussions. We've formed groups of us business managers that use the same transportation vendors have started to have discussions as to what this would look like. Some of the thoughts we have, realizing at the end of the day that it is never good to have a transportation vendor go bankrupt during a process like this, because there are not very many of them available, and if they're not available when we need them to be available, it really leaves districts scrambling. So the approval that we would like to get is to be able to go back and work with the vendors. So for transportation, dig deep into their expense structure so we understand what their expenses are, understand what's recurring, what isn't, understand their ability to recoup some of it under the stimulation packages that have come out, and then negotiate a rate from that we would be willing to pay them from March 13th for now up until May 4th. And again, it is all under the desire to have continuity of service once we emerge from this. On the out of district tuition, it's a little bit trickier. We are, I have to give a shout out to Allison Wright and the team chairs and Jen and her team that are working with all of our out-of-district providers to obtain documentation as to exactly what services they are providing so that we can make sure student by student, we know exactly what they're doing. And then from there, we want to have the ability to go back and negotiate with them as well based upon the level of service that they're providing. We are in constant communication with our representatives, so on the finance side of DESE, because there are a lot of complications with this that we're still waiting for final clarification on. We need to make sure that what we're doing from a transportation and tuition, we are covered from a circuit breaker standpoint, because we want to be able to submit our claims and get reimbursement, because we don't want to lose that reimbursement going forward. In addition, there is one other hurdle that we are working with the town manager. There are several districts have attorneys involved as well, looking at how we go about wording this, because under Mass General Law, there are restrictions about being able to pay for services not provided. The Department of Revenue is supposed to be issuing guidance any day now about how this is going to be handled. We have seen a lot of waivers coming out, as you saw, a lot of the restrictions on open meetings, how they're handling budgets, food services. There's been a lot of waivers. So we think this might be one of the last pieces that they will allow us the ability to do this. We also did want to let the committee know that anything we're able to negotiate, we would come back to the committee, present what we had before any final agreement on terms is entered into.
Great, thank you. You get a motion followed by discussion.
Sure. Tom Wise, the motion. Motion to authorize the superintendent and chief financial officer to negotiate rates for transportation and tuitions.
John Burke, second.
Thank you. Any questions? John Parks.
Gail, this may be a question either for yourself or for Dr. Stice. As far as OOD placements that are outside of the state, New Hampshire, Vermont have already closed their schools for the year. Are we looking at those as close as we should be? Knowing that, you know, room and board is attached and things like that?
Jen, do you want me to start or do you want to jump in?
Why don't you start and then I'll jump in.
Okay. So we would be looking at that, John. So we are going school by school, obviously, as part of what we are looking to negotiate. And I don't know, broad terms, if it were a residential program where a student was placed residentially, that they're no longer able to be placed residentially, obviously that would be part one of a negotiation. Part two would be what types of services are they still able to provide. I do know a lot of the programs are still doing outreach, are still doing plans, are still doing a ton of work with all of these students too. And we also, as part of this, we are also ensuring that whether it's the bus companies, whether it's the special education out of district schools, that they have also committed to keeping their staff on board. So this is also all part of that. Obviously, if they're not retaining their staff, we're not going to negotiate the same way, but the same thing from a continuity of service. If they're not able to get the revenue, they're not able to pay their staff. So it's a big domino effect, and we are going school by school. And I know Jen's been doing yeoman's work on that.
Yeah, so we're in touch with all of the schools themselves. They are required to do the same kind of continuation of learning plans that we are. We've also been in touch with the families, a couple of families of students who are placed in out-of-district schools, needed some technology during this time. We were able to get them that. And so we're really making sure and looking very carefully at every single placement to make sure that the students don't need any additional support, the family doesn't, and that we're following up with the school The other day, I had a conversation with a school that wasn't able to get in touch with the family, and we were able to work something out. So we're talking to them very, very frequently and logging, as Gail said, all of our contact and what's happening at each school.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks,
Gail,
David.
one of the things that I've been thinking about this since we talked about it the other day is when you're in your negotiations and they share with you, their expenses and what they kind of need to keep going. One of the things that you'll see frequently, like with snow plowing contractors, they actually take their plows off the road in the winter to save on registry costs and insurance costs and stuff. I'd be curious to know whether some of these bus companies are doing the same thing, and that could potentially be a hidden cost that you wouldn't necessarily know about.
Right. No, that's an excellent point, Chuck. And one of the items which, true to form, they try to hand us their version of, here's my Excel spreadsheet. And I'm like, yeah, thanks. I'd prefer your audited financial statements, not something you just put together for me. So we've been pushing back pretty hard. On a couple of them, we've already gone through. It's like, yeah, you're sort of travel and entertainment, some of the meals, some of the stuff, like, yeah, all that's coming off the table. We have, especially for our regular education bus, for us, that's a relatively smaller portion of the budget. We've already said we know we're not paying, like, athletics, extracurricular is completely off the table. So whatever buses, whatever runs, those where you have to segregate those costs, that's not part of the negotiation. We are focusing purely on the Metco buses as well as the regular education buses. The Metco Association has reached out to us as well because they are also very concerned what happens if schools reopen and we can't get the Metco kids back because we don't have a bus. But we're actually going line item by line item through their budgets to really understand are you leasing, are you buying, do you have a note, are you taking some of them offline, what's the insurance savings, do you save anything if you have to take it offline versus what's the risk if you have to then try to get it back online in a short order. So we're trying to go line item by line item, even such items as training. You're not training anyone, the people are already here. So we're trying to be as prudent and fair, if you can use those two words together, as we can in the negotiation.
Thank you. Carla, did you have a question?
My question actually tags on a little bit to Chuck's question, and thank you, Gail, for that explanation. In terms of you're looking at the company's expense structures and understanding what their state stimulus package may look like, are you doing that individually as a district, or are you doing that with your group of other business managers?
We're doing it as a group with other business managers, and the rationale behind that is you have a better chance of negotiating the best rate if you do it as a group. If I go individually, my contract's not that big, but if I have 5 districts that use them, we're also doing a very similar approach so we use a different bus company for our special education, that is through SEAM. We are, John and I are actually part of their negotiating team. And it's actually not just the SEAM, it's the SEAM plus 9 other districts that use that same bus company. We have consolidated resources because we know we're going to get the best possible negotiation if we all work together towards a common cause. And that way we realize that they're more willing they're providing more information now that we're coming at them as a group and not one-off. So to your point, Carla, we have definitely grouped up. DESE did a great job in the first couple of weeks. They had I think they had a call every day the first week of closure, and they gathered all the information by every single district, who you used for your regular ed, your homeless, your special ed, if you have foster families. So they did an entire spreadsheet, and they linked all the business managers together that used the same vendor. So it's been a very tedious, collaborative approach.
Chuck, may I make another question?
Yeah.
Comment? How wonderful for these companies to have people coming in who are willing to pay them to keep them afloat.
It's insane. It sort of goes to the conversation we just had. I think this is unfortunate for everyone. And at the end of the day, when schools reopen, everyone just really wants to be able to say, I don't want to say flip the switch because it's not that simple, but we all want to make sure everyone has done exactly what we can to position us to move forward with however this looks.
Thank you.
No other discussion? We're ready for the vote. We had the motion, discussion. Carla Nazaro,
Aye.
John Parks,
Aye.
John Brandt,
Aye.
Aaron Gaffin,
Aye.
Tom Wise,
Aye.
Chuck Robinson, aye. Thank you, Gail.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Get out your hammer.
You've seen me in some of these, Chuck.
So now we will go on to the superintendent evaluation discussion. And I just wanted to just say a few things before we go into this. So as everyone on the committee is aware, the previous school committee voted on this in I think it was November, December, and at that time voted to move to a two-year evaluation cycle. And I just want to say, as having been with that group and on the committee at that time, this discussion is not meant to be any at all disrespect to the wishes of that committee. It was just that there is a significant turnover in the committee now, and this is something that is one of the primary responsibilities of a school committee, and I felt it with a lot of people asking, I felt it appropriate that we revisit this. And again, not out of disrespect or disagreement with what the other committee did, just that it's an important decision, and I feel that this committee has a right or an opportunity to have that discussion as well. And the other thing that I wanted to do is that there's and Dr. Doherty's going to give a presentation in a minute on the superintendent evaluation process, but we're effectively after that presentation, we're get a few different ways we can go. We can either stay with the current evaluation cycle, which would be completing now, April of 2020, followed by an evaluation presentation in June, or we could go to a 2-year cycle with this year, which is year one, and that cycle would be completed in presentation on in June of 2021, or we could go to a two-year cycle, with this also being year one, yet having the presentation and done in April of 2021, which would be prior to the election. The other one that I would like to or to consider is go to a one-year cycle with year one beginning now and to be completed and a presentation on before the April 2021 election. So now that I've thrown a lot out there and probably confused stuff, let's hear the presentation and then we can go back to, I think that the main things we want to decide out of this is, or the main thing is how many year cycle do we want the evaluation to be? So, Dr. Doherty?
Thank you. Thank you, Chuck. So I just want to highlight some things in your packet. The first, which actually just came out April 2nd, given the fact that this is an unusual year, MASC came out with some FAQs on superintendent evaluation during this time of school closure. In addition, in the memo, and I'll go back to this in a second, I outline the key points of what the superintendent's evaluation cycle looks like. I also have a presentation that was given on November 25th by MASC, MASS, and DESE that highlights the new rubric, which the previous committee did vote to use. So I'm assuming that we're going to be using the new rubric, regardless of the timeline. Chuck? Chuck? Is that the...
Someone muted me. Yes, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
But it also talks about in that presentation the best practices for evaluation. So going back to the memo that I dated April 16th, so as Chuck said, December 19th was when the school committee voted to move to a two-year cycle aligned with the election cycle. The purpose behind that was based on new guidance that came out from DESE, MASS, and MASC in that presentation that I just referred to. You have some different options, if, as Chuck said. I believe at the time the rationale of the previous committee, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, was because there was going to be such a turnover of the school committee in March with 3 new members, that to get the new committee up to speed in a short amount of time may have been a difficult process. And so that's why I believe the committee went with the recommendation of the 2 years. But if I can go to the back page of the memo, because I want to talk a little bit about what a 2-year cycle looks like, because I think, at least in the community, there's been some confusion, that there's a perception that there is no evaluation done in year 1 of the 2-year cycle, which is not accurate. So the way that the 2-year cycle works, it's a 5-step process. And I will say that all teachers, once they receive professional teaching status, all teachers, if they're in good standing, go to a 2-year cycle. So that is part of the state regulations. In a 5-step cycle, the first step is self-assessment. That's done in year 1. That is when the new rubric is reviewed by the superintendent, and he or she does a self-assessment of where he or she thinks they are on that rubric. Step 2, which would be annual, both in year 1 and year 2 is the goal setting and the plan development. In October of last year, the school committee did vote both the district improvement plan and the superintendent's goals. That was in the October 28th packet. I also today posted those goals on the website. The third step is the implementation and the collection of evidence, and that is happening throughout the 2 years. And then at the end of year 1, there is what is called a formative evaluation, which is mid-cycle. And all of this, by the way, is in public, I probably should say. It's because the whole process is a public process. So as part of that, the superintendent does report on the progress made on the goals. The school committee reviews the report, they offer feedback at the time, and they discuss progress and possible mid-cycle adjustments with the superintendent. So this is a formative process that's also done with all educators that are on 2-year plans. So teachers go through the same process. And then step 5, which is at the end of the second year, is the summative evaluation. So there are essentially 2 evaluations, one at the end of year 1 and one at the end of year 2.
And the end of year 2 is when you get the written evaluation from each school committee member.
Year one, you also have that option. It's a much less, for a school committee member, it's a much less rigorous process. Because I know the time that it takes a school committee member to write the summative. So it's essentially a narrative in year 1. Year 2 is much more comprehensive. So, as Mr. Robinson said, you essentially have the following options. The first option is we could this could be a 1-year cycle and complete that cycle in June. In order for that to happen, I would need at the next meeting to do a presentation on what that looks like and go through the evidence. As you saw in the FAQ from MASC, that obviously is going to look a little bit different now that we have not been in school. Well, we've been in virtual school, but we haven't been in physical school for over a month now. So that's one option. The second option is to go with a 2-year cycle. This would be year 1 of the cycle. There would be a formative evaluation done in June, and then a summative evaluation would be completed by June of 2021. The third option is to go to a 2-year cycle. With this being year 1, there would be a formative evaluation at the end of June, and then the summative would be done by the election, which would be March of 2021.
And then, John, I thought a fourth option would be go to a one-year cycle, but have it so that the action points happen before the election. So we would just change it would be a 1-year, we'd be in that, right? We'd be starting that as we speak, and the presentation or your presentation or evidence would come to us in January, I guess, and we would vote in before the election, April of 2021.
Yeah,
You
that's the
follow?
third option I just presented.
Well, no, the third option is go to a 2-year cycle and vote. What I'm saying is just substitute, go to a 1-year cycle, but just change when we do the evaluation from June to April.
That was option 4.
You follow that,
Wait,
John?
wait.
You look like,
I'm confused because this is part of this year since last.
I understand this year is, it will catch up, it will catch up once we get to, we would already be in the year we'd be evaluating under scenario 4 we're in right now. It's just that the evaluation would happen before the election as opposed to June.
So what's the difference between option 3 and option 4? I'm confused.
Well, I mean, after, with option 3, you would then start a new 2-year cycle after April of 21. With option 4, you would start a 1-year cycle after April 2021. So there'd be a summative every April under option 3. There'd be a summative,
Okay, I
option
understand.
4.
So you're combining option 3 and 4 together, and extend the next one would be a
I
1
mean,
year.
yeah, it's the same scenario. It's just so it's annually as opposed to biannual. Does that make sense? You see what do you understand?
I understand now.
Aaron, did you have a question?
I think Sean had his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sean.
Yeah, I have many questions. One suggestion though, not to overcomplicate this, but I'm not sure it's necessarily sort of a finite number of options, right? I mean, I think there's a question of what does the committee believe the sort of process should be on a go forward basis, and I think you could have a separate question, which is what do we do, kind of at this point in time, given that previous iteration of the committee jumped into this process kind of in the middle of an evaluation year. So the reason that I suggest that is that just from where I sit, I feel conceptually comfortable with the 2-year evaluation process. And if we wanted to sort of discuss, if we wanted to discuss that as a go forward option, I'm very comfortable with that. I was uncomfortable with moving into a 2-year process after goals had already been set, for what was ostensibly at the time a 1-year process. And I know that the 2-year cycles and 2-year rubrics, contemplate annual goals. But I don't know that any of us sort of have a view of how the discussion might be different if you were sort of planning for a 2-year evaluation process versus a 1-year process as you're establishing those goals. So, my suggestion would be that we have a discussion a little bit distinct or a little bit separate from, 3 or 4 predefined options first, and then sort of figure out what the pulse of the board is as we try to kind of vote on.
Okay.
If I could just add one other piece, and I don't know, Sean, if this is going to help or muddy the waters more. You do have some regulatory requirements that you have to follow. So if you're going to do a 2-year evaluation, it needs to be completed by June 30th. If you do a 1-year evaluation, it needs to be completed by June 30th. Those are regulatory. You can't alter the dates.
How's that? I mean,
In the
I thought that we
regulations,
voted before.
the evaluation needs to be done by June of that year, the end of June. Whatever
So
year
in
you
the previous
decide, it has to be done.
discussion, in the previous discussion around moving it up to March or April, prior to the election, that was doing it in advance of a June deadline, ahead of a June deadline.
Yes, yes.
Aaron?
Sorry, I was making sure I was unmuted. I have a bunch of questions, so I don't know if I'm going to ask them all in one
Sure.
set. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I was a little bit confused if we went with an evaluation that was to happen, essentially it'd be March because it's not really April because the election is the first Tuesday in April typically. How would we theoretically evaluate without seeing the completion of the goals? So at the point when we would be writing our evaluation, the superintendent would only be, 2/3 of the way through the school year. So I was confused by that choice in terms of how the committee thought that would look in terms of our ability to evaluate, if that makes sense. I'm also wondering how much of that was driven by the fact that 3 members of the committee were going to be leaving versus feeling like it was what was in the best interest of the superintendent and the district. So I'm trying to get a better handle on some of those motivations because forever, new school committee members have come in and have dived right into the evaluation process. So unless Chuck, because you've served for a long time, you can speak to how many new members actually waived the participation in the evaluation and if that was a frequent occurrence and something that was a bigger deal than I'm realizing.
Yeah,
Those are initial questions.
I think that that's kind of varied a little bit, but for the most part, new committee members choose not to do evaluations for various reasons. Some of it based on I think guidance that comes from the Mass Association of School Committees, and some of it is just they don't feel comfortable evaluating on goals that were not made or not direct, not that they didn't vote on as a school committee member. And then we've had some school committee members who have just done complete evaluations. So it hasn't been the same. It's kind of been, as I said, a little bit of everything. So, I guess, it's what people are comfortable with as individuals and whether they want to do it. I don't know whether, there could be some question on whether that someone should be evaluating on things when they weren't elected to the board or not. But, again, some have just not considered that and just done an evaluation anyway. So it's really been all over the place.
Okay.
Chuck, can I add something to
Yes.
help answer? The other piece that will be challenging, and it has nothing to do with new school committee member or not. It has to do with the cycle of state assessments. And of course, this year it's going to be even more challenging because there aren't any state assessments. But the state assessments the results of the state assessments do not come out until October. So you're always looking at data that potentially is a little less than a year old.
John Parks?
Yeah, so, if, Chuck, if you don't mind, I'm gonna just point out something to Aaron's point. When you go through charting the course, they'll actually give you the recommendations from MASC, which is you should only be doing an evaluation on what you've actually seen as a school committee member. So it's from the time you're sworn in and attend your first meeting until that actual date of when it's due. So you can choose not to participate, you can do a partial, or you can do a full. The recommendation from MASC is that it should be as a school committee member what you've seen. And I think that was a lot of the guidance that I went on last year, along with talking to 2 other committee members that were on the committee that voted for the change, when I looked for guidance as to what they had done. The charting of the course really walks you through what the evaluation is, how it's done, and why it's done. And I think it's a big part of a school committee's responsibility that's explained during that course. And it's so important for that course to be had before you do it.
Thank you. Tom?
Thank you, Chuck. A couple of key points. One, to address Aaron's question as well. I agree with John in that the charting the course is a very valuable course from, the background that they provide. I would say this, that, if you look at some of the last members that have done reviews when they were new to the board, Linda did, Elaine did, I did. John did not, Sherry did not, Nick did not. So it's, if you look at just the most recent board members, it's kind of a 50-50 split, more or less. I actually don't remember what a few others did, but so it is important that you also do it from a perspective of what you have observed, and you will have the opportunity to observe all of the evidence that Dr. Doherty provides. You won't have the opportunity to, consider meetings that you weren't in because you weren't there. But any of the other evidence that's provided, or any evidence you create from the time that you are after that you were appointed or elected as a school committee member, is able to be considered, which is heavily what I did in my case. So everybody takes it in a different way, and neither side is wrong necessarily. Both sides have equal merit. I think another thing we need to consider as we talk through this, Sean's approach of 1 year, 2 year, I think is something that's good to know there. But I also think we need to consider Dr. Doherty's contract, which specifically says the superintendent shall be evaluated annually based on standards adopted by the Board of Education and the related rubrics. And it says on or about June 15th of each contract year. So, we may decide as a group, and if Dr. Doherty wants to do it, and we're not in contract negotiations right now, but that also would have to be considered as part of this conversation. That's one thing we missed in the December consideration, was that clause in the contract necessarily. On or about gives a little bit of freedom till the end of June, but does not necessarily give freedom till the next April, per se. So that's one issue that I think we need to address or think about that we did not address previously.
Well, can I just comment on that real quick? So I think that as we just went through there isn't it's not a summative evaluation annually, but formative may count for that to cover for that contractual wording you just described. But you're right, we should check that if we change something, but I think that
I mean, I think we could make the argument either way on that one. I mean, formative could potentially apply, but what we just heard is a formative would be kind of a narrative answer, right? You write up a paragraph or a page or whatever. What this says is the related rubrics. So, I mean, you could put the rubrics into your paragraph in your formative. Again, you could argue either way. I mean, as we go through this and have this conversation from a forming perspective, I think to Sean's point, I think the first thing we've got to figure out is, do we want a 1 year or 2 year as a group? And if we do, when do we want, and when can we? To Dr. Doherty's also earlier point about what our regulatory obligation, and I'm trying to look at FMGL on that as we talk. When can we execute it if we do a 1 year? This is an extremely extraordinary year. Dr. Doherty had to be out for fair reasons, right reasons before, so we missed a couple of months there. Obviously with Corona and COVID-19, this is a whole different year from a school and evaluation perspective. So it's just a really weird year. I personally would lead towards going with a 1 year evaluation on a go-forward basis, but finding a way that we could make sure that it's executed before April of next year to the election point, personally. I think the 1 year provides a good checkpoint for a position as important as a superintendent is. I understand that, tenured teachers have the 2 year option, and they're very, very important, but somebody who oversees an entire district has a different level, a different standard in my eyes of what needs to be adhered to. So I'll pause there and hand over the mic to whoever's next.
Aaron? I'm sorry, we had Sean again. I did that again. Sorry, Sean.
It's all right. No worries. Like Tom, I was trying to dig up what the sort of statutory or regulatory requirement around June was, and the reason that to be honest caught me off guard when you said that, John Doherty, is in the FAQ from MASC that you included in the packet under the timing section. It contemplates evaluations being delayed into the summer or early fall. Is that so? Maybe you were talking in generalities, and this is something where we think there's some relief this year. I'm not sure kind of how to square those two things. Yeah, so I'll pause there.
I think the sentence says that it needs to be mutually discussed and agreed upon.
Yeah, I guess I'm I think you said regulatory. That's different than contractual, right?
Well,
so contractually
last
on or about June 15th.
The last evaluation, even though it was given in October, was done as of June 30th. So if it's an annual evaluation, it should be done by the next June 30th.
Okay. So can I assume then that what you mean by that, or let me just ask what you mean by that? Is it that in this guidance from MASC that talks about summer or early fall evaluations, that may be the time when the evaluation actually takes place, just given the realities of everything that's going on right now, and the burden that it would put you and the team under to document the evidence. But the as of date for that evaluation, even if it's delivered in August or September, for instance, would be as of June 30th of 2020. Is that what you're saying? Is that the disconnect? Okay.
Yes.
That's correct. We,
okay.
the evaluation that was done in November, I think, as you know, was based on write-ups actually that were written up in May and June of that year. So. Yeah,
I heard that comment as regulatorily it had to be completed by June 30th, as opposed to an effective date of the end of June 30th or the end of June. So that helps me. Thank you.
I think the June actually may be in a contractual piece.
Yeah, it says on or about, but when the previous iteration of the committee voted in December to move to an election cycle based timeline, I think there was a recognition then that to do that would require likely an amendment to the contract, right? 'Cause, it's hard to argue that. No, Tom's shaking his head.
Didn't come up. It came up.
No, Did not come up.
It did not come up. Okay, maybe it was a different meeting then. Okay.
Aaron,
So
go ahead,
sorry, go
Sean, sorry.
I was just gonna say, I'm not sure I agree with Tom on sort of the go forward plan. I still feel like this year, given that we sort of, parachuted into the middle of a 2-year process, with only 1 year, with only 1 year goals in place and no contemplation of what that formative assessment would look like. I still, for this year, my preference would be to look at it on a 1 year basis.
Aaron,
Yeah, thanks, Chuck. So first, I appreciate John and Tom mentioning the charting the course. For anyone who doesn't know what that is, it's a training offered by the Massachusetts Association of School Committees for new school committee members. And if we weren't in the middle of a pandemic, then Carla and I were going to be doing that training in early May, I think, maybe even Sean as well. But as it stands right now, it's entirely up in the air when the three of us will be able to do that training. The other thing I wanted to ask about.
if it makes you feel any better, they didn't have it when I was elected.
Okay. Way back when. I guess I'd like a better picture of what the formative assessment could look like in terms of an evaluation, to have a better grasp. I know, Sean, a couple times you've mentioned that we're already in the midst of 1 year goals, but it's my understanding that even the 2 year evaluation cycle would still dictate having 1 year goals. So I don't know if Dr. Doherty can speak more to what the formative assessment looks like, or someone else.
So the formative assessment, you would give a rating on each of the 4 standards, and you would do a narrative, either an overall narrative or a narrative on each of the standards, and an overall narrative. So it's not as comprehensive as a summative, because you're giving ratings on each indicator on the rubric.
So Aaron,
This would just be the standards, not every indicator.
Correct.
That's the difference. Okay. What were you going to say, Chuck?
that was what I was going to say. It's a more broad narrative on the standards, and not a detailed report like you would see now if you pulled last year's evaluations.
It's more of a midpoint check-in, where there's mid-course adjustments made to goals, or any feedback that's given at the time, mid-cycle.
Can I ask a follow-up to that?
Yes.
Typically, when you've been on a 1 year evaluation cycle, have you done that? Has the school committee done that formative assessment mid-year?
No, I've done a mid-cycle, I've done a mid-year presentation of where we are with the goals.
Okay.
No, the way it's done now, or the way it had been done, was, we got an update in probably the beginning of the calendar year.
February. It's usually February.
And then we did our formal evaluation. We started writing them in May, and submitted them in early June. And one of the committee members would compile all the data and do the summative.
And just last, am I correct that even a 2 year evaluation cycle is based off of having annual goals?
They can be. Yes.
Thanks.
Carla?
So, Chuck, I have a question for you. In Dr. Doherty's contract, it says that he should, in furtherance thereof, on or about June 15th of each contract year, the committee shall prepare a written evaluation of the superintendent. Was that ever modified when the 2-year evaluation was agreed upon? Or does the formative evaluation count as that June 15th, towards that June 15th provision?
So, no, it was not modified, so that would have been in just this past December. So we haven't modified that. And to your second question, that it's my feeling that the formative satisfies that requirement. But you know, I think Tom Wise brought up a good point that, you know, maybe that's something, if we did go to a 2-year cycle, I should probably have council look at that to make sure that that contract conforms with the period of the evaluation cycle.
Is the formative evaluation a written evaluation?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay,
But it's not at, as we just said, it's not at the level of detail
right.
that the summative is.
Because my initial is, if we're out of, by going, by continuing on with the 2-year cycle, if we're out of compliance with the contract, then we're bound to go back to a 1-year cycle to be in compliance with the contract.
Sean?
Yeah, so I'm still getting tripped up on how annual goals would support a 2-year process with a formative and a summative that are sort of different versions of an evaluation. And the reason I'm getting tripped up on it is the indicators which we wouldn't evaluate in a formative evaluation, if that's my understanding, right? We would do it at the standards level versus the indicators level. Those are ostensibly tied to the goals. So if the goals from year 1 of a 2-year cycle and year 2 of a 2-year cycle are different enough, you may never evaluate the indicators attached to those first year goals. It almost puts more, it just almost puts more of an emphasis on the goals you define for the second year rather than the first. And that's why I can't sort of wrap my head around how you detach the two from one another. Now I can understand, we have some goals that we think can only be accomplished over the course of 2 years. So we'll have those. And in parallel, we might say year 1 also has these additional goals that are, appropriately suited for a single year of performance. But I'm struggling to understand, where those indicators get evaluated for the goals that are ostensibly attached to the first year.
Chuck, do you want me to try to answer?
Sure, I have a comment. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Say what you need.
So I think the formative is a checkpoint, and at the same time it does coincide with those 1-year goals. But I still think that at the end of the 2 years, when you do your summative, you're gonna revisit at a greater detail what you did in your formative for those first year goals, as well as offer great detail on the goals that ended in the second year. So I wouldn't say those get put to bed in just the summative. They get revisited and in a greater detail. That's the way I understand it. And John, do you disagree with that, or?
Well, I'm going to add more. I feel like tonight, every time I say something, I'm muddying the waters more. So there's actually 2 sets of goals, Sean. There is the, by statute, every educator is supposed to have a minimum of a student learning goal and a professional practice goal. The superintendent and the principal for the school improvement plans, the superintendent also has the district improvement plan goals, which most of the time are multi-year goals. The annual goals, the student learning goal, professional practice goal, can either be annual or multi-year. It depends on the depth of the goal. It depends on the progress of the goal. Sometimes goals are accomplished quicker than were previously planned. The goals need to be fluid for that reason. So there is no sometimes definite, the goal ends at this point. It depends on the goal. Sometimes the goal is modified mid-year or mid-cycle, depending on if it's a 1-year or a 2-year plan. But the school committee, when they do their summative, and this you learn this in charting the course, but also I will do a presentation on this for you as well. The school committee is always evaluating the superintendent in their summative on the progress of the goals. So you get a rating on your goals, and you get a rating on each indicator, which is each of the 4 standards, and then an overall rating.
I think, and John, you may have said this, I think that, Sean, there could be a situation where there's no 1-year goals. They're all 2-year. That doesn't mean you still don't do the formative. You're still going to do that. And I guess the only time it would also coincide with any particular goal is if they were 1-year goals. But we don't have to always have 1-year goals. We could have 2-year goals, or more than that. You know.
Yeah, Chuck, I think your comment that in the instance where you have kind of a finite 1-year goal, that would still be revisited at a deeper level in the second year. It helps me clarify. So thank you for that.
Any questions, comments, ideas?
So Chuck, I raised my hand. I don't know if you saw it or not.
Oh, I just came up. Sorry, John.
That's okay. Something to also remember is the district improvement plan is normally a 3-year plan. This past one was a 1-year, but that is not the norm. It's normally a 3-year plan. So you're looking at a 3-year goal coming up on a new district improvement plan that we need to start looking at. So that's something we should also be aware of.
Correct. Anyone, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, John raises a great point, and I think a lot of Sean's questions are really going at this. And we have a 1-year goal cycle, and I said before it's kind of a weird year, so it's almost unfair to judge against the 1-year cycle with everything that we've had to deal with this year. But we are due, and we promised ourselves as a committee, the 3 of us that are still sitting and the 3 new ones probably watched it, that we would sit down and start thinking about and have an offsite if necessary to have a 3-year goal discussion, and put that together. Back in July, we had that discussion. We went into great detail about it. So we're due to do that. The reason I only bring that up because it does seem to me like we're in this weird situation where if we don't execute the review now, we're going to start another 3-year. We're going to be in this weird overlapping partial review cycle type thing that covers 8 months of a 3-year cycle, and it's just going to be in a very weird place. So I'm actually changing my thought, and I think we should just finish this 1 year and then go back into a normal cycle process. Finish this 1-year cycle in the June time period of this year, and then start again. And whether we want to do 2 years at that point or 1 year at that point is a conversation. It feels like we're in, cycle going around the hamster going around the cycle doing the same thing. But at that point, at least we would have a chance to align our goals discussion with a review discussion. Right now, the disjointed nature is a challenge, and for that matter, I think I would be more comfortable saying, let's go back and let's finish this 1 year. And we all have to be realistic about what has happened this year, but finish this 1 year, and then we, commit to finishing or planning the 3-year cycle when it's appropriate, when we can get together, because that's the other challenge we've got to deal with is we don't know when we're able to get back together. Maybe we do it virtually, maybe we don't. But then have the conversation about 1 year, 2 year, whether we want it to go over that period at that point in time.
So, Tom, what you're suggesting is we keep the have a evaluation this June.
Yes, sir. I mean, just to finish the year, and then we can start fresh going into next year. And, the board is the board at that point. We can have a conversation about whether it's a 1 year, 2 year in concert with conversations about goals, and really think about how those goals would be achieved in a 2 year cycle if we were to do a 2 year cycle. Which ones are realistic, which ones aren't. We always know it breaks it down into objectives, and there's some things we think can be achieved the first year, some things that will take 2 years, but we're having that conscious decision in concert. It's the misalignment, I think, that's the problem right now. If we align ourselves, in this process, with Dr. Doherty and his staff on the 3 year process, et cetera, then we have, I think we have a much more aligned process of goals and review.
Sean?
Yeah, I agree with Tom. I think it's much it's just much more straightforward to do sort of a clean break at this point and align the goals and the new process sort of at the beginning at the same time. Particularly if we can be sort of pragmatic about what's going on right now, and recognizing that statutorily the evaluation would have to be through June 30th of 20, but we be pragmatic about our ability and Dr. Doherty's ability, frankly, to support doing that evaluation right now versus delaying it a month or two per the guidance from MASC. So I guess what I'm suggesting there is we'd do it for this year, but maybe we're looking at a July or August completion versus a June 15th completion.
Aaron?
I just want to make sure what Sean is proposing is a viable option. Just reading the MASC memo, it talks a lot about election timeline, but we already got our election in, so we're not running up against a changed election date. But it's your understanding from that memo that school committees still have the liberty to change deadlines given everything that's going on?
I don't know who you're directing that question at, Aaron, but my understanding is sorry, Chuck. I was just going to say my understanding is that we have a contractual obligation to do it on or about June 15th. So John would have to be amenable to that. But as Chuck said, we've actually completed the evaluation and well into the fall in past years. It's got an effective date or an end date of June 30th of whatever the prior school year or the prior year is. But the actual time when the evaluation is completed and delivered has often gone past June 30th.
Yeah, so it would just the main point is is the substance of it goes back to June 30th. So if you don't do it until the summer or whatever, it's still that it's effective for that contract when that contract says. So John Parks?
Yeah, something we're all overlooking here. We also need to vote on a contract extension by June 30th. So we need to take out, we can't really put, if we're going to change this date, we can't push it through to July. If we're going to consider all this information for a vote on a contract extension, we have to have that in well before that June 30th date so that we can decide whether or not we would move forward on a contract extension. We have the do nothing clause, but I think that really shouldn't be an option. We've got to make a decision as a committee on that contract extension and then stick by that. So having that, if we're going to do an evaluation this year, that's a full evaluation, that's fine, but it's got to be done well before that June 30th date. So we can also get in a meeting and make a decision as a group on that contract. Because I do think we owe a vote on that. Whether it's affirmative or negative, that's up to each individual person and what they think is best for the district. But I think as a whole, if we sit back and we wait until July to do this review, we're doing a disservice to the district and to Dr. Doherty, because we're basically doing a no vote again without the information we need.
Well, I don't necessarily think that the two go hand in hand. The extension of the contract doesn't necessarily, or non-extension of the contract isn't necessarily going to just be on the basis of the most recent evaluation. So, there could be other factors. So I don't know that it is nice to have them all at the same time. And I'm not saying we're not going to do it in June. Someone brought up a letter that came from MASC. That's just guidance. That doesn't mean we have to, or we're going to carry it on or move it out to August or July. It's just guidance from MS, and they're not telling us what we can and cannot do.
I don't agree. I agree with you, Chuck, but I think this is something that we would normally use in a decision like this.
Yeah.
So it's something we have to think about.
Chuck, can I just add on to that?
Yeah, you didn't raise your hand.
Sorry. I'm virtually. I agree with Chuck on that they're almost mutually exclusive, the contract extension and the evaluation. Certainly, I think a goal can be for us to try to have it done, but I see them as mutually exclusive.
Okay.
Chuck, can I just add
Sure.
something?
Yeah.
In the past, I have put together a memo with the timeline and a presentation. I'll be more than happy to do that for next Thursday, to show you what it would look like to have it done by June.
Okay.
Okay?
So that would mean, would committee members want to wait to vote until we see that, or vote and see that, after the fact?
A minute.
Tom?
We're all talking then typing. Last year we had the playback meeting the first week of May. We had, the school committees,
The what meeting? I'm sorry, I missed that.
the goals playback, can you hear me? I think
Yeah.
my headset's still active, but, that was the first week of May. I think it was May 9th, if I recall, so maybe even into the second week. And then we had the school committee's first drafts had to be submitted by May 31st, right? Meetings with Dr. Doherty the following week to have your one-on-one conversations. And then we were supposed to have the final ones in for consolidation by around June 7th or June 14th, one of those 2 weeks. I think it was June 7th initially, which meant that the summative person had a week or two to collate it and put it all together by the second to last week of June for presentation and discussion, either the second to last week or the last week of June for the committee. So that was the timeline last year, give or take. And to that end, if we want to have and I think we can also, Dr. Doherty, give you a little bit more time to prepare your materials. I don't think it has to be ready next week necessarily. I don't think that would probably be fair to you to request that if we were to go to the 1 year cycle that we're talking about now. I think we can talk about a meeting the first week of May that leads us to the same general timeline as we had last year. So the materials were more or less ready on time last year. We just had to punt at the last second for a few reasons, but.
Okay. Sean?
I don't remember what I was going to say anymore. I think I might have been saying the same thing about the two things being disconnected. So forgive me.
So, does the committee want to go to the 1 year and we'll wait for the and then we can vote on that, and then we can pick up the discussion on the timeline when John puts that together for our next meeting? Is that what I'm hearing or not? Or do you want to wait?
Are you talking to me, Chuck, or who?
No, I was talking just out loud to the committee.
Okay.
I don't know. I guess we can still vote on, and then we'll see whatever how it works next week. Or do you want to wait to see how it works before you vote on it? I guess what I was asking.
I'm okay either way. I could vote.
I guess the agenda, I got some battle scars about agendas and open meeting. The agenda says we're voting tonight, so I'd like to
You have
vote.
to, yeah, you have to vote tonight.
Yeah.
We could table it
So could
technically
we
if we wanted to.
could we vote something like return to a 1 year evaluation cycle with the intent to complete this year by the end of June 2020? Right. I mean, I think that's sort of how we're going into this. Is we intend to see a timeline that allows us to be done by the end of June. If that becomes impossible for some reason, then that's a conversation that we'll have to have, and Dr. Doherty will have to be on board with, or not.
Sean, I was going to raise a very similar motion. It was going to almost be the words. So if you want to take that motion and make it a motion, if Chuck is okay with that, then.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sure.
You can read it and just so slowly so Linda Engelson can hear you.
I wouldn't be reading. I'd be doing it off the cuff. Tom, if you want to work off of what you have in front of you and tweak it, that's probably cleaner.
Okay, I'll do it that then. I move to return to a 1 year cycle with the intention of completing the summative evaluation by the end of June 2020.
This is Sean, second. Close enough.
Okay, is any discussion, further discussion? Dr. Doherty, do you have anything?
I thought you were asking me if I was voting.
Oh,
No, I don't have anything else.
okay, ready for the vote. Carla,
Aye.
Sean,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
John Parks,
Aye.
and Aaron. Is it Aaron?
Got my last name there? Aye.
And Chuck, aye. Good. Thank you. So we're gonna meet next week. We've covered the agenda at this point. We're gonna meet next week. Is there anything anyone else wants to talk about?
Was there
we
any
have
public
public-
comment?
We have,
I think you covered, I think all the public comments were covered.
can we read them though? Who has them?
I have them if you want me to read
I
them.
got them right here. I can do it. There was one public comment on who did reviews right away and who did not. I believe actually Mr. Wise read that.
There's a minor correction to what I said in that comment there. Dr. Doherty, if you want to read it.
Can you
Sure.
say who sent it, for the record, who sent the public comment?
Yes, Arian Downing sent a public comment. New ones who did reviews right away: Elaine, Linda, Nick, Tom, Gary. New ones who did not: Sherry, John, Parks.
Okay, so that's actually a comment of something that's on the agenda tonight. That's not that was, is there any public comment about things that aren't on the agenda?
No.
Okay,
There's one. John, there's a memorandum of understanding question that's a public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yes, that was actually further down. So there's a question when the memorandum of agreement that has been signed may be made public. Can be made public at any time. Just so the community knows, the remote learning plan is essentially the MOA. There is some legal language that's attached to it, which we can certainly make public as well.
yeah, so we had talked about, let's get that up on the district page.
Are we talking about, Chuck, it's Carla, are we talking about the first and the second MOA?
We can certainly put them both on.
Okay, thank you.
And the
And
most likely will be another one.
Yeah, I was gonna say the second one only goes until May 4th.
May 4th, yep.
Was that the only public comment of?
Looks like it.
The only other thing
Yes.
we did not address that's in the questions was the revolving account for RISE. Maybe we can take that as a follow-up conversation or for next week or something, because I think we might need to do some research to answer the question.
Well, I think, Aaron, now
Gail.
Gail mentioned in her presentation that they were gonna have a full accounting of the revolving kindergarten and RISE revolving account discussion coming up soon, right?
Yes. It won't be, it'll be sometime over the next few weeks.
That's what I mean, yeah. And Mary Ann Downing's question was regarding the agenda item, or was it a comment or a question?
She had a couple, but most of them were comments around agenda items. Gail has her hand up in the chat.
Hi, Gail.
Hi, Chuck. I might have missed if you want, I can do the same quick overview that I gave for kindergarten. I think I misunderstood when Erin asked. I thought it was kindergarten that she was asking. Or this might have come through another comment. But I do have a similar, very high-level analysis for RISE. While we did start the year with a $219,000 balance, based upon looking where we are in the budgeted offsets, we will be ending the year at about 119,000, and then looking at next year, it looks as if we will be down to about 90,000 in the balance if we keep all of the offsets as they currently are. But again, I think next year's revenue estimate is going to need to be refined based upon current events.
Excellent, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there anything else anyone would like to?
Since Chuck's speaking of trying to keep us all clear of OML, since it was on the agenda, do we need to have an official motion to postpone the discussion on the Student Opportunity Act so that we're clear from an OML perspective? We posted about it, but we have not discussed it, so.
The agenda item was not a voting, it was a Student Opportunity Act feedback.
Right.
So we're not postponing a vote or anything.
Right, just the agenda item overall is what my point was. But if we don't need to, that's
And
fine.
certainly do that. We don't know when that is, though. I think.
We can indefinitely postpone until John wants to bring it back, or we agree to bring it back.
Is there a motion?
I'll motion that we indefinitely postpone the Student Opportunity Act feedback until a time such that we need to provide the feedback to the state.
Second. Carla Nazaro.
Carla,
Yes.
Aaron,
Yes.
Sean,
Aye.
John Parks,
Aye.
Tom Wise,
Aye.
Chuck Robinson, aye. Thank you, Tom. For keeping me out of trouble.
Keeping us all out of trouble, buddy. I got one more motion for you.
Yes.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second, John Parks.
Carla,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Sean,
Aye.
John Parks,
Aye.
Tom Wise,
Aye.
Chuck Robinson, aye. Thank you very much, everybody, for participating and all the staff and everyone that was here. Appreciate it. Good job tonight. Thanks.